I knew exactly where the sermon was going. But then I made the mistake of actually studying the scripture. And I realized that this passage from John was taking me in a completely different direction. In fact, studying the Gospel of John, well, it's making me think. And you know, sometimes thinking can make us pretty uncomfortable. So the title of the sermon today is not When Rules Are the Problem, although, as you may know, I often think rules are the problem. But no, the sermon title for today is Amazing Grace. In the passage this morning, Jesus encountered a man who had been born blind. He'd been blind since birth. And immediately, his closest followers, the disciples, asked what had caused the man's blindness. Was it his sin or his parents? Well, Jesus replied saying, neither of them have sinned. And then he returned sight to the man. Now the problem was Jesus had healed this man on the Sabbath. Immediately the Pharisees, who had spent their lives committed to following the rules of Moses, along with the thousands of other rules they had created so that they'd make sure we all followed the rules of Moses, immediately they condemned Jesus as a sinner. He had worked on the Sabbath. And in their eyes, working on the Sabbath was amazingly, incredibly sinful. And how was it that a sinner could heal another sinner? Well, I got to tell you, when I read that passage, I was angry with the Pharisees because they were using rules. They were choking on rules to prevent Jesus from doing something that was really good. The rules were the problem. See where I was going at first? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that focus missed the point of the passage entirely. In fact, that interpretation of the story in John misses the whole point of the Gospel of John. So to understand John and his point of view, we have to go back and start at the beginning of the Gospel. Now, John's Gospel gives us salvation in the first chapter. It says, in the beginning was the Word. Everything the Word created received its life from him, and he gave light to everyone. The Word lived with us as true light shining in the dark. The Word became flesh and lived with us. In other words, when the Word became a human being, it was God becoming a human being on earth. So those who saw Jesus as God immediately experienced salvation. Those who saw Jesus and did not see God were still blind to the presence of God in their world. So for John, and for those who listened to John in the first century, salvation came at Jesus' birth rather than at his crucifixion. Mind blown. Which means for John's gospel, sin was connected to belief rather than behavior. When those who saw Jesus recognized God as a human being, they immediately experienced salvation, being at one with God. And when those who saw Jesus did not recognize Jesus as God, as a human being, they were sinners. They did not recognize God. So the man who was healed from blindness saw Jesus and recognized him as the Messiah, the Son of God. He wasn't a sinner because he believed in Jesus. His blindness was simply the result of genetics. The Pharisees saw Jesus and recognized someone who broke the rules. To them, Jesus was a major league sinner. They did not believe that Jesus was God in human form. They were blind to the light of God, so they were still in a state of sin. They had not received salvation. All right, this kind of blows my mind. So is this making sense? Any questions at this point? No? Making sense so far? All right. In John's Gospel, belief in Jesus as God as a human being, or God incarnate, determined whether one was a sinner or not. Behavior, then, did not determine sinfulness. In fancy words, sin was theological rather than moral. Sin was determined by beliefs rather than behavior. I have to live with that idea for a while, and maybe you do too. I mean, we're so accustomed to labeling people as sinful or righteous based on their behaviors. And most of us are really pretty comfortable judging people by what they do rather than what they believe. And judging people by their behaviors and their beliefs about behaviors is often what we use to decide who we think is right and who we think is wrong. Judging people by what they label as sinful is often how we decide who we might vote for. Judging people by their behaviors and their beliefs about human behavior, well, let's face it, it's one of our favorite pastimes. But the problem is, we're judging people by their behaviors only. And John's gospel defines sin by belief, not by behavior. For John, recognizing Jesus as the light of God, the Word that is God, who came to live with us in flesh and blood, that is salvation. What we do after that, our behaviors, once we claim Jesus as God, well, that's between us and God. In other words, we cannot claim to love Jesus and believe in Him as God on earth while spending our time judging and hating our neighbors because their behavior doesn't match our morals. Rather, our job as believers in Jesus as God on earth is to learn and to live His teachings. Learning what He did, what He said, and conforming our behavior to Jesus' teachings is our work. Once we believe salvation's a given, the rest of it, our work, is to learn what He said and how to live what He said. But it's our behaviors that do not determine whether we're at one with God or not. Our belief does. Make no mistake, though, this understanding of salvation about sin does not leave us free to do anything we want to. Belief in Jesus and His teaching goes hand in hand. That's why we need to know what Jesus taught. We can try to ignore His teachings, and we may be wrong in how we put Jesus' teachings into action, but it's not our job to judge someone when they get Jesus' teachings wrong. When we are wrong, or someone that we know is wrong in how we put Jesus' teachings into action, well, let's face it, the Holy Spirit won't leave us in peace until we get it right. Helping us align our behaviors with Jesus' teachings, well, that's one of the big jobs of the Holy Spirit. So believing in Jesus as God living with us is what matters in John's gospel. Which means John's gospel is the ultimate expression of God's amazing grace. Belief in Jesus as the Christ, the Son of the living God, God living with us, that's all we need to gain salvation. It's all we need to be at one with God. That is amazing grace. What we do after that depends on how well we know Jesus' teachings. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be pondering that one for quite a while. Welcome to the pondering and the head scratching with me. I'd be happy to talk about it anytime. Amen.
Amen.